costs. So you need to ensure that in analyzing it that you look at all three components. Is it going to help you save salary dollars? Is it going to help you save reagent and service dollars? And is the piece of capital equipment going to be too costly, or is it going to make an enhancement to the hospital, both from a service as well as a cost aspect?
Okay. Let tape roll.
I don't like that one.
Okay. Change your framing. You want to try it again right off,
Sure.
or do you want to think about it for a second?
Sure, no,
All right. And we're seeing your hands in the shot, so use it for me.
okay.
And talk.
There are three components to the cost of a piece of equipment. One is the capital cost, one is the reagent cost, and one is the labor cost. You need to look in terms of purchasing at all three. Simply the capital cost isn't an ongoing cost, and it'll be depreciated over 5 or 8 years. 10 years depends on your institution and how they time the piece of equipment as far as the...
That's all right. Screwing up is not bad. Don't
okay.
worry about screwing up. Screwing up's okay. And anytime.
There are really three components of cost: the capital cost, the reagent cost, and the personnel cost. In looking at the purchase of a piece of the capital equipment, are you going to be able to eliminate full-time equivalents? Are you going to be able to have a reduction in your operating expense for either service or reagents? In looking at the capital cost itself, it's not as important a component as the ongoing costs are. 64% of all hospital dollars are spent on labor. And when you look at that as a big cost, how is this going to make you more labor effective? How is this going to make you reduce your operating costs? How is it going to fit into the overall institutional plan of cost containment under prospective reimbursement?
Good. Change your framing, Gary. No, actually, I need you forward again because I want to
Okay.
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 You ready, Gary? No. Roll it. Okay, do it for me again.
There are really three major components of cost when you purchase a piece of equipment: the actual cost of the piece of equipment, the reagent cost, and the salary cost that's affiliated with it, or the number of full-time equivalents that you have. In looking at a capital equipment acquisition, not necessarily is the piece of cost of the capital the most important component. Unbundling the services and taking advantage of having fewer full-time equivalents in your laboratory, more cost-effective laboratory from the service, as well as a reagent viewpoint, can help you have the laboratory of the future, one that provides a low-cost, fast turnaround time, earlier discharge for the physician, and a higher quality of care.
Okay, change your framing, Gary. You changed some aspects of your response in that one. I want to hear that again. Okay. Fine. So go over that one for me again.
Okay. In terms of looking at a piece of equipment as far as acquisition goes, there are really three components to cost. There's the actual piece of capital, there's the reagent cost as well as service, and then the third component is labor. When looking at acquiring a piece of equipment from purely financial viewpoint in the laboratory, you need to ensure that it's more cost effective from a labor viewpoint, simply because most of your dollars in your budget are for labor. You need to make sure that your reagent costs are reduced. You need to ensure that your service costs and all your other costs and components of costs are reduced with a capital equipment acquisition. Equipment is no longer a revenue enhancement as much as a cost reduction.
Good. Pause it.
For winging it, we might as well.
Let me know when you got to speak. Okay, let's talk about, I forgot how we're going to
Number 9, benefits.
Yeah, right. Question 9, the benefits analysis methodology. Can you break it down into its components?
Pre-DRGs, we looked in terms of what a budget might look like, and the component parts of it, again, are reagents, salary costs, and a number of other minor line items. 64% of the cost of hospitals is in salaries. When DRGs came about, many hospitals felt the most important aspect of cutting costs was to cut back with vendors on the reagent costs. Many of them now have had to come to grips and come to terms with they can't be all things to all people, and it's had to been a reduction in personnel is the key component of that. And looking at pre-DRGs and where we are at this point, we need to look at having salary reductions, regionalization, something that cuts our personnel costs, which is the single largest component of cost in the hospital.
Okay. Pause it. What I want. Your hands. Don't be afraid to move around in the chair.
I'm totally paranoid now about the shoulders.
Okay. Let me know when you got speed. Okay, come on in, Danielle. Okay, stop for Danielle. Here we go. Tell me about the benefits analysis methodology. God, I gotta know.
Oh, this is a very critical aspect to all nothing.
I don't want to hear about being.
Okay,
I want to
yes.
hear about it being easy.
Okay, it's very easy, yes. It's so easy.
You can't remember.
The benefits analysis is a very easy process for someone in the laboratory to go through. You need to look at two very important aspects of it. One is the marketing aspect. How are you going to market this service, or how is it going to help you in your marketing with your physicians? And the second is the cost productivity aspect. So you need to look at the capital equipment acquisition either from a marketing enhancement or a cost reduction component. Each member of the team, if you use a team at your hospital, needs to go out and make a site visit and speak with the vendor. Either go to the manufacturer, to go out, look at the piece of equipment, see what it looks like there, look at a beta site, and talk with people who use it. And once you've got both the financial data as well as the scientific data and see how it'll fit into your overall hospital test menu, you need to come back, sit down with a financial proposal, meet with your individuals in your finance department, come up with a cost-benefit analysis, and then come to a decision which you would later present to your administrator and add that piece of equipment to your overall menu in the laboratory.
Wow. Change of framing. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to try to pull some of it up, Allison. All right, we got the framing change, and basically go through it for me again. You can try to be more succinct as possible.
Okay. What were we talking about?
Okay, we're talking about benefits and methodology. You started talking about it's either going to enhance your marketing or it's going to enhance your cost containment, or maybe both.
I'm trying to have a sense of humor and loosen up here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the methodology, there are really two components you need to look at. One is marketing and whether it would add a marketing enhancement or a new product line or a new series of testing to your hospital, or whether you can use it as a cost containment or a financial edge for the laboratory. In visiting a vendor, they'll help you with the financial aspects of the package. You need to look at the
Let's pick it up with
manufacturing
the vendor
site.
again. You don't need to do a thing different. Let's just pick it up with the vendor aspect, because I don't think you go to visit the vendor.
Oh no, you would visit a manufacturing site.
Oh, you would?
Yes, you'd go out, you'd look at a manufacturing site like the Spectrum, and you'd go see it in the actual manufacturing aspect.
Tell me that then. You go to a manufacturing site.
You can go to a manufacturing site, speak with the vendor, and see a piece of equipment in development, and talk with them about what they can do for you. They'll come out and talk with you at your site at the hospital and give you an idea how it'll have a financial benefit, but you need to go out either to a test site at another hospital or to the manufacturer and see the piece of equipment operational to make sure that the claims that are made are in fact true and that that piece of equipment can satisfy the needs of your physician staff and the patient.
Okay. When do you gather and change your framing very quick, when do you gather together the team and help them? How do they help you in this process?
The team is essentially gathered when the initial individual sees something. The clinical chemist is at the national meeting and sees a new instrument. physician to physician talks about a patient who's read something somewhere, or a physician's attended a conference and they want to know about a particular test because they think it can help their patient population. So you begin gathering the teams and ideas generated, and then that idea becomes reality by finding out which vendors provide those pieces of equipment and those services. You go look at the particular services and see if, in fact, what the claims are true, and then you develop a financial package in conjunction with your financial services office for the ultimate presentation to the hospital administrator.
Okay, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's take that same thing, number 9, that benefits analysis methodology from the top again, and see if we can break it down into succinct little components, and I'm going to put those together in editorial, I think, to make them have a little impact. What's the first step in the benefits methodology?
The single most important aspect of that
Hang on one
is...
second, start that again. That's okay. I'll take whatever I can get, Lindy, and I'll just make sure the next one's different. So, give it to me.
In terms of a benefits analysis, you need to look at whether it's going to be a marketing enhancement or whether it's going to be a cost reduction.
And change your framing. Where do you go from there?
From there, you need to find out what particular pieces of equipment or instrumentation are necessary in providing the services that you're looking to market or in helping you with what cost reductions you have an interest in.
Change your framing, Gary. Once you, let's see, when do you call in the team at this point too, or is that sort of been going on?
There are a number of members of the team who can come up with the initial idea, either at a national meeting, state meeting, from a physician who's contacted the laboratory, or from a patient who has an interest through the pathologist. There's a number of methods of determining whether a particular test is wanted or needed, at least planting the seed.
Okay, good. Stop tape for a second. Let me take that table 4A in front of me and roll. I'm going to ask you to talk to me about determination and drawback of the present equipment. Okay? Are you prepared to do that?
No.
Okay, fine. You want to pick it up with assessing the cost product? We got that. Let's talk about assessment of position in the product life cycle. Okay? Go ahead.
The product life cycle is an important aspect simply because if you get a product into your laboratory that's too early in development, there may not be the number of technical service representatives who can come to your hospital in a timely manner and repair the piece of equipment. New parts, like having an automobile, aren't available yet off the production line. And if it's too early in the product life cycle, you can't support the product. If it's too late in the life cycle, the manufacturer has run out of parts. Again, they've trained their people to handle the latest in their line of equipment, and they're not supporting it late in the life cycle. So it's important, because many instruments have such a fast life cycle, maybe 5 years, 8 years at the top end, that you catch it early enough in the development so that it can be supported for a period of time where your hospital will be with good turnaround time for repairs, have enough of an inventory with the vendor, and be able to get your instruments up and running in a timely manner and supported properly.
There are 3 different sources. Pause the tape for a second. You've got these 3 sources of information. First, you go out in the field visit, you talk, and you get some feedback about the vendor. You might talk to the vendor themselves, and then you might get other information. So let's talk about all of that input.
In looking at a new instrument in the laboratory, many times your vendors have been around and have a track record. And in order to buy a new piece of equipment, if you want it supported through the whole product life cycle, you want to go with an established vendor who has a good reputation, and many times the vendor that you've purchased from before. It's never a good idea to be an innovator in this area. You may get a good purchase price, but you want to make sure that individual is around to support both the service as well as the reagents for the life of the piece of equipment.
Okay, good. You have enough input now to make a decision. So take me through the last part of this methodology. You make a decision, you request some bids, and you better know what it is you want to ask, I guess, when you request it. You've got to get the right information from the vendor, so you might address that. And then you consult the financial manager, I guess. So now made a decision. You've got to know what you want to ask the vendor in terms of bids, and then you've got to go to the financial analysis.
Many times in the laboratory field, there are several instruments which can work for a particular product. Some may be better than others in one way or another. Once you finish with a financial analysis like this, it's very easy to go to your financial services department and say, can you verify this to ensure that if we're going to have a reduction of FTEs, that we in fact carry through with our part of the bargain. If we have a cost reduction, that we are accountable through our budget. So a lot of the financial services input is accountability, and accountability is probably the biggest key under DRGs, is the hospitals are being made accountable for their actions and for decisions that they're making. And when you're making a financial analysis, you're making a commitment to the institution that you can provide a level of service and be financially responsible both.
This isn't one of the listed questions, but you mentioned the word accountability, so let's pursue that and change the framing real quick, Gary. The federal government or third-party payers are making hospitals accountable. Is administration making the laboratory manager more accountable for this?
I think hospital administrations, in order to keep their hospitals viable, have to make everyone in the institution accountable. Each of the departments in the past never had a responsibility necessarily for following up a year or two later with commitments that they made. Now, in order to keep the institutions viable, when you make a commitment, it's important to get the financial people involved in order to say, yes, we're willing to make this commitment, to stick to it, and to follow up with it, and be accountable.
How far down the road, change the framing, Gary, how far down the road is it reasonable to be asked to be accountable? At the end of the depreciable life?
I think that what they need to do is have benchmarks for accountability. I think that you need to look at what proposed cost reductions there were, what marketing enhancements there were, and look at it on an annual basis through the first 2 or 3 years of the process, particularly if you're spending $100,000 to $200,000 for an instrument. There needs to be some accountability there for the hospital to ensure, again, that they're financially viable as an institution over the long run.
Let's backtrack a little bit in making that proposal. You talked about being personally responsible for being able to make a personal presentation to it. What do you need to come armed with in order to go to administrator? What does the administrator want to hear from you if they ask you to come in and talk about it?
Administrators have changed their view. In the past, it was always, what can it do for patients, and how can we as an institution be on the cutting edge of medicine? How can we be innovative with whatever we need? Now the administrators are looking at it from a different viewpoint. They're looking at it from a financial viewpoint, from a marketing viewpoint, from a more business viewpoint. Rather than being all things to all people, they're looking to provide a good quality service for a smaller population.
Okay, change of framing, Gary. Tell that to me again in the terms of now an administrator is going to think of what's in it for me, and by that they mean what's in it financially and all that.
In the past, the hospitals, from an administrative viewpoint, were looked at a community service organization. As monies have gotten tighter, as people have become more accountable, the administrator is now looking to be...
That's okay. You can start that over. We're going to rather fast. I'm just trying to keep the energy up.
The administrator in the hospital is looking at acquisitions, capital equipment acquisitions, and accountability from a new viewpoint. They're looking to make sure that each of the departments meets their end of the commitment. If they say they're going to have a cost reduction, if they say they're going to have a marketing enhancement, there's a great deal of accountability now with administrators, and they've taken a whole different view of, before it was we want to be the good guys in the community, and now it's we want to ensure that we're providing an ongoing service for our hospital and that we're keeping the doors open.
Okay, good. Tell me about 1977 and 1983 again with this document.
In the past, when you looked in terms of buying a piece of capital equipment, and this is an example of what I did back in 1979, we looked at a reagent rental versus a purchase versus a lease, and there was a one-page piece of paper, paid piece of paper.
Let's take that from the top again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I want you to make it personal, like you did, okay?
In
This is question 1, Phil.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Capital equipment acquisition has changed significantly from 1979 to even 1983 or 1984. When I worked for the hospital, we were looking at a piece of equipment to purchase, and I made a one-page analysis of this particular piece of equipment. From a revenue viewpoint, it was a 4-month payback. It was a very simple proposal, and I got the piece of equipment in a week. In 1983, about the same price of a piece of equipment, there's now a 50-page analysis from the vendor, verified by the financial services department, with a full committee of the hospital voting on whether or not I should have that piece of equipment to provide an even better level of patient care than there was provided in 1979. It's gone from just a purely financial to an overall comprehensive marketing, different patient populations served. There's a whole component now to looking at a piece of equipment as opposed to the past where it was very simple and money from the retrospective reimbursement was easier for the hospital to get and to spend.
Okay. Still along that same line, yeah. Pause. Okay. Tell me the story.
When I first arrived at Stanford, we were looking at a piece of equipment that was on a reagent rental, and I prepared this one-page analysis. And through that one-page analysis, we looked at reagent rental versus purchase versus lease. The cost on the piece of equipment was $116,000. The administrator saw a 4-month payback and said, this is a great revenue enhancement, let's go buy it. We didn't compare it with other instruments. We didn't compare it with manual methodologies. We didn't look at the number of full-time equivalents involved. We looked at nothing but a purely financial. Before we bought the reagents, now we're buying the piece of equipment. This is the second package that I did in 1983 in conjunction with a vendor. It's about 50 pages long. Every component aspect in the laboratory and hospital is looked at, from a full financial to a marketing to how it will provide an earlier discharge for the patient. That piece of equipment was $110,000, and now there was a full committee to review it rather than just the administrator only. Money's gotten much tighter in the hospitals, and it's much more difficult to get equipment, and obviously the justifications have to be more thorough. And the vendors can help you, the financial services department can help you, and the laboratory team needs to get together and provide for the administrator all aspects to that important decision.
And stop. How close would you be? Really
Okay.
short.
Okay.
I did this in 1976 for people who cost this. I did this in 1983. Same price. All right. This is question 1. Tell me about what DRGs has done to the proposal making process.
The proposal making process has changed significantly. In 1979, I did this proposal, one page, and a week later, a $116,000 piece of equipment was approved. In 1983, working with the vendor, a number of site visits, it took us almost a year, working with the vendor, a 50-page proposal to get a piece of equipment that cost $110,000.
Right on, bro. That's the way it's got to look, okay? Pause it. Tell me about how easy that is to do.
With assistance from your vendor, many times who have financial analysis on their staff, they can talk to you both in terms of technical as well as the scientific aspects of making a proposal. They'll help you do the financial aspects. Your financial services department at your hospital needs to verify what information they've given you. They can assist you, and this module can assist you in making a good professional financial analysis and proposal to your administrator.
Okay, this is question 2 still. You're going to be a lot more succinct about it.
Okay.
Don't worry about wraparounds. Don't worry about the setup. Don't worry about closing it off for me. Tell me why this is easy to do, and hold it up and tell me
Okay.
why it's not so tough.
It's very simple in working with your vendor to make a financial analysis. The vendor will put together the figures. If you provide them with your turnaround times, with the number and type of tests that you want done, and with the data, they'll help you with your financial analysis. You need then to work with them and present it to your financial services department and your administrator.
Okay, don't wring your hands this time. Use them for me. Change your framing, Gary. And, yeah, we'll take some tight shots here in a minute, as soon as I'm done dealing with that. Okay. Be as succinct as possible. Why is that not tough to do?
Anyone in the laboratory can do a financial proposal like this in working with your vendor. The vendor, if you give them the proper information, can put it together, and your financial services officer can help you in the hospital come up with a good proposal for your administrator from a financial viewpoint.
Good. Question number 3. As succinctly as possible, what are the 3 things, the 4 things, the 2 things that people ought to get out of reading the damn course book, Module 3? What do you want them to do? Type here.
In looking at this course module, the most important components are that you need to work together as a team, you need to work with your vendor, and you need to work with your hospital administrator in order to either have a marketing...
That's all right.
Excuse me.
You don't even have to say the most important thing. Just think about the basic elements nice and tight, Gary, and tell me.
The elements in making a financial proposal or in making a proposal to your administrator are to get together as a team with the laboratory, to work with your vendor, to unbundle services, and to acquire the kind of equipment that you need as a hospital to survive under DRG.
Okay, fine. Some of that got a little bit mixed up. We're talking about working with your laboratory when really I think we want to work with the other services. Okay, still nice and tight, Gary. Tell me again just the basic elements of the methodology. And what are we talking about? Really just basic, I just want you to read through.
Okay. The importance of this module are that you need to learn to work as a team in the laboratory, work with your vendor to make the appropriate proposal to the administrator, and get the kind of equipment that you need to have a viable laboratory in the 80s.
Okay. Question 4. Pause for a second. Oh, yeah.
Stand by.
Okay. Question 5. Do you frequent gay bars?
Yes.
Yes.
In the,
Tell me
I
about
should have worn my pink shirt.
Right. Pre-DRG, post-DRG revenue.
Pre-DRG's revenue enhancement was the most important aspect of the
Use your
laboratory.
hands. Tell me with your hands. Take it from the top.
In pre-DRG days, the most important aspect was revenue enhancement. Once DRGs took place, cost containment was the single largest component. I think we've changed from one to another very rapidly.
Okay. Now I want you to elaborate on that for me a little bit and change your framing. That is, now don't make it quite so short. You told me the basic overview. Why is it that way?
Why is it that way? God only knows. The change in diagnostic-related groups coming into law is that before you look for revenue enhancement, because the laboratory was the single largest component of revenue for the hospital, now everyone wants to cut costs. So we've gone to a cost-cutting mode.
Good. Question number 6. How has DRGs and prospective payments impacted the vendor, the type of equipment he brings to you, his approach? Are his skills different?
The vendor's gotten much better as far as their ability to unbundle services, provide you with financial analyses, and help you sell the administrator. It's not easy to sell equipment anymore, and those people have become much more aggressive who sell capital equipment.
Okay, I dropped a thing while you were saying that. It's my fault. I'm sorry about this. It's a nice answer. Use your hands for me, okay?
Okay.
You're expressing your nervousness through your hands.
Am I?
Express nervousness through your hands by putting them out front, and I think
Okay.
you'll gain more confidence if you see that you can express yourself with your hands.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay, this is question 6. That is impact of DRGs on the vendors business.
The vendors have become much more sophisticated simply because it's more difficult, because of tighter dollars, to sell equipment.
Okay. It's not only, how does that make them be sophisticated?
The vendors have had to develop very extensive protocols They've had to do a financial analysis for the laboratory. They've had to learn how to unbundle services so the laboratory can afford to purchase those services.
Have vendors become more sophisticated in being able to determine market trends, or is there better forecasting?
The vendors have changed in that before, through a product life cycle, they would have a new